We got a nice green day in the markets and in crypto. Bitcoin cryptocurrency and the stock markets are looking good today. Have a nice little bounce day. So what is going on? So let's take a look at markets right now, about 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Dow Jones is up 2%, 2.4 on the S&P, 2.5 on the NASDAQ. So markets are having a nice little bounce recovery today. And we'll take a look at Bitcoin and the crypto market here in a second. Been a nice little bounce over there for the last few days. So what is going on? So with the markets, a couple of things. One, consumer sentiment survey followed by the Fed shows inflation expectations ease slightly. So this was that University of Michigan survey showing that, I don't know, they survey 400, 600 people, whatever it is, that the expectations of inflation plateauing are getting better and better. People are thinking that inflation has kind of peaked out there, that it's kind of plateaued, and maybe it'll turn around and come backwards. So any kind of little headline news is going to move markets, positive or negative. So this is a positive sentiment article here that is moving markets. Of course, the other big news is Roe v. Wade being overturned in the United States. That's creating a lot of controversy, a lot of protests, a very polarizing time all across the world with everything that's going on between the war, inflation, devaluation of currencies around the world. It's just really, these are the times that a lot of things happen. So interesting times around the world. So let's take a look at the charts here. Bitcoin cryptocurrency real quick. Bitcoin is continuing the bounce from that local bottom that was put in back here on June 18th. So a few days into this, and a couple of things going on with the traditional markets as well as crypto is that you have the pre-programmed buy the dip that's still going on. All markets were oversold. Nice little drops last week after the Fed did their thing. And so it's kind of a, buy the dip kind of thing, a little bit of a rally before any continuation moving into next week, the end of the quarter. So there's going to be a lot of volatility, rebalancing portfolios with the quarter ending, things like that. We'll start to hear some earnings coming out. Quarterly earnings are going to be huge. Those are going to be market movers. And we are also going to start looking for the next inflation print, which should come in hotter. And the Fed came out yesterday. Chair Powell spoke yesterday and said that he is committed to bringing inflation down. So what does the market do? It rallies. So again, a lot of this is the buy the dip thing and, portfolio rebalancing, some of it starting this week, but definitely going into next week on that news. So we know the Fed's going to raise minimum 75 basis points. The reason markets are bouncing today is because investors are kind of thinking, well, hey, if consumer sentiment is up, if inflation's peaked, maybe Powell will pivot into the next meeting. And what will happen is they'll telegraph, no, we're going to raise 75 or 100 basis points, depending on the inflation reports. And markets will, take the next leg down in advance of that. And then maybe we could start to look at finding a real bottom after the next big downward move. If inflation somehow miraculously comes in, significantly lower than the previous month, then, we'll get really good. We'll get a nice little rebound on that. But right now, again, it's just levels. So same thing here, had a bounce recovery, and then, the market kind of moved sideways. So let's take a look at this on the daily. This is Bitcoin on the daily here, and very clear levels here. But basically the first set of consolidation and distribution took about 100 days. This is, when Do Kwon was buying and all that was going on. The most recent level here back in May, after the market dropped, had that little bounce, and it consolidated sideways for 25 days. So this time, same thing. And again, these are just following inflation reports and Fed responses. So far, we're only 9 days into this. So 25 days puts you out about where the Fed reports next time, right? 25 to 30 days, somewhere in that time frame. So that's kind of what's going on here. Markets just kind of following what the Fed does, waiting for inflation reports and things like that. And I think after the next leg down, we could really start talking about looking for that more macro bottom. As you can see, these are just consistent levels that the market has been following. Bitcoin has been following on the way down. When you look at it on the weekly, you can see it even more clearly, how things are just kind of unwinding. And the monthly paints an even bigger picture in terms of, what can be expected and what the outlook kind of looks like. And of course, the big track is for Bitcoin, the 200 weekly moving average. Price is well below it. We'll see if it's going to close below again for the second week in a row. And again, this is things are different this time for Bitcoin, in terms of looking at what Bitcoin's done in the past, how far it's drawn down, how it's rebounded, just all the different things for Bitcoin and crypto. That was inside of a market that was not in a environment like it is now, with no quantitative easing, without the Fed put in the market. So very different environment. This time is different for Bitcoin. So you have to expect, different ranges, different outcomes in terms of where we're at right now. And here is the Bitcoin hash ribbon indicator. Buy signal indicator still in capitulation here from the miner standpoint. That miners are still capitulating. And again, they sold last month. So as we get closer to the end of the month, they may potentially be selling coins at the end of the month to continue operations in the next month. So we'll just have to watch what that looks like from the miners. That could weigh on markets a little bit, still have a little bit of the contagion out there in Bitcoin and crypto. But, when you look at this on the hourly, a lot of people are getting excited looking for reversals. And this was a nice little bounce for Bitcoin. But again, it's just doing what it's done. And that was a 20% bounce, nice little bounce. And then kind of ranging in the middle of that, just like it did over here. Same thing, had a nice bounce, and then just kind of ranged in the middle, had a couple of, nice little runs there towards the end, first part of June before this leg down that we recently went through here. But let's take a look at traditional markets. Same kind of things playing out in traditional markets. Here's the Dow right here. And you can see, these bear market rallies, you get these buy the dips that are kind of programmed in, these little bounces. A lot of it is short covering. A lot of it is, portfolio rebalancing, and again, working its way back to pre-pandemic levels. And then where you really see the price trends is when you go on the weekly and you start looking at, here's the Dow on the weekly here. Here's the NASDAQ on the weekly. Here's the S&P on the weekly. You can kind of see, the patterns developing. And of course, you can look at the 200-week moving averages on the major indexes and approaching the 200-week moving average. Nothing is below it yet on the major. That's the iShares Russell 2000 that's below it right now. So these are the things that we got to kind of keep an eye on. And again, expect a lot of volatility, a lot of price action leading into earnings week next week. End of the quarter, portfolio rebalancing, things like that. We've got to watch what the Fed does in terms of the inflation print. Unfortunately, this reverse head and shoulders that a lot of people have been looking at and talking about right here, this, and this, looking for that breakout from the range, this little trend line here that a lot of people have been following. When price broke, a lot of people were looking for, this head and shoulders to play out. If you measure this right here, the continuation of that trend. So let's take a look right here, go from the rip to the peak there. A lot of people were looking for that right there, putting up around 25,000. There was some technical confluence for a bounce, to potentially 25,000, but right now it doesn't seem like that's the case. Oh, here, let's take a look at this too. So what I was looking at the other here recently was, what did we do last weekend? So here we are on a Friday here, and the weekends were kind of flat with, last weekend, the most recent was the 15th, I believe. So, that Friday, Saturday, after all of the interest rate moves and everything, but weekends have been relatively flat. It's been the weeks, the Monday, Tuesdays afterwards, where these big down moves have been most recently. So, weekends surprisingly have been relatively flat. We saw a little bit of price action last weekend because it was a holiday weekend. Saw a little bit of movement there, but generally the weekends have been kind of flat. So I'm not expecting necessarily huge moves this weekend. I still think we're going to consolidate in the range. We're going to continue to just kind of bounce along in this range, get everybody bullish, get everybody bearish, get everybody bullish, bearish, just kind of wear people out. And then really it's going to depend on what the Fed comes out and does, what the inflation print looks like, and then, what the rebalancing the portfolios look like, where the capital's going. So as I always say, watch the markets into the close today. The momentum into the close tells you a lot about investor sentiment, what they're looking for, how they're feeling moving into next week. And, that's all we can do is just kind of watch and wait for things to bottom out. I think we have at least another leg down in traditional markets and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general before we're going to see any kind of a leveling off and potential signs of a reversal. But, the Fed still has a long way to go in the inflation fight. They still have a long way to go in raising rates. and they haven't even started rolling off the balance sheet yet. So a lot of stuff out there on the horizon to get through, a lot of headwinds, but we will get through it. The markets will bottom and they will recover. And that's when your chances for some really nice moves and recoveries, or whatever your plan is, that's when those moves will be made. So these are the things I'm looking at, and I'll see you on the next video.